Hey, this is what we've been waiting for. This is GRC. I mean, think about it. Compliance, risk. We take risks even just getting started on time. So, I mean, well, welcome everyone. Just wanted to talk to you quickly about how great it is to have everybody here today. Hey guys, what's the title of our show here? What are we doing?
I don't remember.
Leadership? No, I don't know. Hey.
Leadership
Brian.
Blueprint. There we go.
There you go. It's leadership blueprint, not bloopers. And we're talking about government. We're talking about risk and compliance. And just wanted to kick it off today with, introduce yourself. Tell us why this is important today and why we're even talking about it.
Well, I think one of the big things is GRC is so important. And I go back to a conversation I had yesterday, bringing in about the apple tree. I had an apple tree in my front yard, didn't even know about it because it was like this big. It was huge at the base. It wasn't providing fruit. And I didn't even know I had one until a neighbor came by and said, this used to be an apple orchard where the development was. Most people don't even understand how to get value out of their GRC, more or less even get people to use it right. And then let's talk about getting that ripe, juicy apple.
Love it. Well, I'm calling in here from the Big Apple, so let's keep that Apple theme going. Mark can't hear again. Oh, come on, man. Can you hear me?
No, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Oh,
I just
okay.
can't hear
All
Brian.
right.
Yeah.
Okay,
You're fine. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. Hey, y'all. Don Baham. My day job, I'm a CISO. I'm at Rubicon Founders. We're an investment firm. We're in healthcare. It's good to see everybody here. I think the topic of trust is one that we can go a lot of different ways, but the way I think about it is, we don't really have a good security program without trust. And honestly, we don't have good relationships without trust. I'm a big company and team culture guy. If you've even seen any of my stuff out there, you know that. So I see an intersection here, talking about trust, talking about security, talking about GRC, talking about leadership. I don't know. I'm excited to get into the conversation, and I know we've kept y'all waiting a little bit. So let's get going, Mark.
Yeah, I'm Mark Wolf, and I actually bridge the gap between what people say and then what people hear, and bridging that gap so it comes about outputs. And that's why I wrote a book called Yeah, But. Too many excuses that I hear all the time through leaders and all the reasons why things can't happen, and their teams why things can't happen, and about overcoming those. So guys, let's get this kicked off. There's so much impact today, but what's some practical examples of what is really going on kind of behind the scenes? There's a lot of optics, a lot of things that people see or hear in the media, but what's the real story that you guys are seeing?
So I think one of them, Mark, and think about, I'm going to not do yeah, but I'm going to do a yeah, and also introduce myself because I'm here in Atlanta, which I'm surprised neither one of you picked on my Apple story when I'm in the Peach State. So in Atlanta, and I'm Saka Atlanta chapter president, and then been with this other company for about 25 years, a little small insurance company that everybody knows with the ovals. But the bigger thing is it's just helping people connect. And that's one of the biggest issues in this GRC cybersecurity and those types of things is that most people do not understand their GRC environment and all the different risk types and everything else. And that it's got to tie to the mission and the value of the company so that it makes sense. And that is a big thing moving forward. What do you think, Tom?
I think this is hilarious, some of the technology issues we're having right now. So Brian's done talking now, Mark, so I'm gonna pick up here. It's interesting. I think, honestly, when I think about security programs in general, cybersecurity, kind of what we're dealing with today, I'll just be honest. Sometimes I think, well, why does this really matter? Like, I understand why it matters, but sometimes I still question it. Mm-hmm. And I wonder, this idea, this concept of trust. Again, what I said at the beginning, kind of, if you don't have you can't have a good security program without trust. There's a lot of things in this world, in this life, you can't have without trust. I see what's going on today. I don't know, this crazy political environment, this nonstop cybercrime environment. And I wonder how much of this that I do day to day really matters. And I want to kind of unpack that a little bit. So I'm going to tease that out in this answer, and then kind of curious to talk about that as we go along and hear from the audience if we can. I'd love to get some interaction here as we go throughout the LinkedIn Live. Mark, what do you got?
We're still waiting on people to be able to give feedback on that. But what I'm seeing though, mostly though, is as you're kind of talking about this, Don, is I think there's a difference between roles that people play when you're talking about this topic, right? It's not everybody has the same vision of what it is, right? So if you're deep in it and you're really having a conversation because you're in compliance and but most of the people aren't, right? Most of the people just have to follow the rules or know what's going on and everything else. So let's talk about how it affects organizations, right? How it affects some of these rules, some of the things that are mandated, how it affects the teams that have to follow and live by these.
So I think one of the great examples is some of these things going on, like Don talked about, is you've got to be secure, but the customers are expecting things to be secure now. So you've got to tie that in, but you've got to tie into your developer community and make sure they understand why. That's why culture is so important, like Don was talking about. They've got to understand the value to the organization. And that's why digital trust is so important in this day and era, because it's not about the law, the reg, or those types of things. It's about people. Do they all believe? Does leadership believe? Does the software developer believe? Does the business believe? Does the customer believe? And are they all trusting each other together?
Okay, I'm going to throw something out there, Brian. So we're talking about kind of GRC, right? Governance, risk, compliance. Like, who cares? Like, really, who cares? Like, if you're compliant, I don't know, compliant companies get breached. If you're handling IT risk, okay, great. Like, what does that actually mean? Think about governance in general. It's kind of boring. So, like, why? Okay, talk about the audience here today. Why should we even care to hear more about this topic? I'm honestly curious. What do you think?
So my biggest thing is, if you look at the world of compliance, the cost is expensive now. It's expensive to maintain compliance. Like, think of even like PCI DSS. Most companies have to do that because they want to process credit cards.
Right.
And then there's the other compliance with the regulators.
But if you look at a lot of these large breaches, right, they have PCI compliance.
Yeah.
So they're not doing something right. I know a lot of got security folks on here, compliance folks. Compliance doesn't equal security. Security doesn't equal compliance. Yep. So are we losing trust in that dynamic? And if so, how do we get it back? Or should we care to get it back?
I think it's more about focusing on the value of doing the basics right. And I think that's part of the biggest issue in the GRC is we start focusing so much on the branches and the little small pieces of the tree that we don't look at what applies to the core part of the business. And that, are you protecting your core? I had a CISO at one point in time in my career that's like, we're like a moon pie. We've got a hard shell and we got a nice creamy filling. So, you can't do that anymore.
I'm not a moon pie fan, but I get the analogy.
You gotta really know what data is, how it resides, and it's all over the world, literally. And do you know where your data is? Do you know where your crown jewels is, as the saying goes? That's a bigger importance than being compliant. But the thing is, your GRC program has to show compliant, because now the regulators are finding at extraordinary cost. Last year, we saw the first $1 billion fine. Now, granted, it's still in case law, so we'll see if it actually is $1 billion. But we're seeing groups getting fined upwards of $1 billion. That will impact your ability to do business.
Sure. Well, depending on how big you are, yes.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's kind of why I say, okay, these companies that get breached, most of the time they're not going out of business, right? They're going to pay a fine. handful of cases, smaller entities that actually will cease to exist or severely hamper their operations. But I don't know, this notion of, it's interesting to me, like how do we actually justify all the work we're doing, and is that building trust with the business when sometimes we still have that breach and we spent all that money, and yet we're having to have a conversation with attorneys and go through litigation and class action or whatever it happens to be. Mm-hmm. I do think that impacts trust in general. So I think that could be an interesting topic as we go throughout the conversation. The other thing I would also say, kind of to your point, Brian, is what I'm seeing is a lot of security leaders partnering with data leaders, right? Because they're so closely connected. If you don't know where all your data is, and sometimes I don't think even data leaders know all the time, because the business likes to do what the business likes to do, right? And they're going to create something maybe in a silo you're just not aware of. But I think that partnership does help. And I think then bringing in the risk leader or compliance to that same kind of team mentality, I think has a lot of promise. I'm seeing more of that go on in businesses, but not necessarily everywhere. I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I think it is, and it kind of ties to the whole idea of digital trust, right? That you're involving the business, you're involving the data, you're involving the infrastructure, you're involving the app development. Everybody comes to the table now. And you're saying, okay, how do we get better as an organization versus, okay, there's the app flow, there's the infrastructure team, there's the security team, there's the compliance people, there's the finance people. Oh yeah, and there's those like business people that actually help you figure out how to actually sell or market your product to the you got to bring them all together and go, okay, what are we really trying to solve? And most of the time, they're all trying to solve things around the GRC space, but they have no idea. And so part of the biggest thing in this is telling the story and helping them understand how doing GRC well, how doing information security well, how doing whatever fancy compliance program you have well, ties back to how does the business operate better than it did before? If you think about change management used to have releases and windows and everything else. Now you got deployments every day, sometimes every hour, sometimes every minute.
Yeah, change control is different now, for sure.
Yeah. So you've got to evolve. You can't. That's, I think, the biggest challenge with GRC is, I heard a conversation yesterday where another friend that has a group he just joined into, his GRC people are rutted into manual processes. So that's not being a partner. Creating digital trust is partnering and figuring out yes and, which ties to Mark in like the leadership part, because you can't do the yeah but anymore, or as security became in some organizations the land of no.
Yeah, right. So Mark, I know you probably still can't hear Brian, so I'm gonna.
I know he's making a lot of sense because I can just tell.
He is. So he's talking a lot about storytelling, and we were chatting about that before going live and before some of the technology issues we had. So I know you've got a lot to say around storytelling. So talk to us about your take on that and how we can leverage that within GRC or within security, within any of our programs.
Yeah, and thanks guys for kind of walking through this, because there's so many layers to this. But when you think about stories, right, everybody tells stories all the time. But when we think about GRC and anything else, it's like, do I trust the storyteller? Do I trust what they're telling me? Or is this just a story? Okay. So when I ask Brian a question, or I ask you a question, if you give me information from your background, right, and you talk about your life or your family or anything, I know how much you care about your family. So I know that when you say something, it's out of something you care about deeply, and I'm going to lean in and listen. What I think leaders miss a lot of times is they don't actually relate things outside of the world of technology to their stories. And what is important is that people hear what you're about and the integrity of your words and what you really care about, because we aren't just our jobs. Now, this isn't squishy, right? This is about getting things done. So if you want people to lean in and understand what you're about, and you want to talk about things that are really important, you got to make it relatable, because not everyone, and I know this is a surprise to some technologists, but they have a life outside of technology. And when I'm saying their jobs, and they actually care about other things. So when you relate, like, the reason I care about making sure we're compliant is because there's actually people out there will lose their business, or things will happen, or we can lose our jobs, or you can actually wind up in jail if there's something that goes wrong because of this. And I care this much because of these other reasons. Well, now you just made it real, right? It's not just doing it because you're supposed to. You're doing it because there's a bigger, broader reason of why you do what you do. Does that relate, or is that crazy talk?
No, I think that relates. I mean, I look at, and you and I have talked about this before. I want to be working at a place like where I'm spending most of my time that's got a mission that I can get behind, which is one of the reasons I am where I am right now. Yes, we're an investment firm, but we invest in healthcare companies and start healthcare companies that are actually serving the needs, the gaps in the healthcare market, which there are a lot of. But I can get behind that. The reason I'm doing what I'm doing, the reason I care about security here where I am, is because I know then that's going to further our portfolio companies and actually take care of people that have real healthcare needs. So that's why I'm attached to what I'm doing. And I think without, a lot of times, at least without that, I know we're kind of getting far off the reservation, but without that attachment to the mission and the why, that's where we see some of the burnout from security, GRC, risk professionals that are in there, kind of the daily grind. And if they're not doing it for a purpose, or they don't know their why, then we're seeing a lot of that burnout. And that's a lot of the mental health conversations that are going on right now, which is hard to see. But I think it's a big part of that is understanding why you're doing it and what your mission is and whatever role you are.
And that's the beauty of why the three of us are together. Brian's at a huge company, and the first conversation we heard about how State Farm cared so much that they were willing to take people that weren't in certain roles and actually bring them forward to roles that weren't linear to where they were. And I was like, hold on, you guys really do that? Yeah. We're not just about financially making sure people are taken care of, but they're actually doing things. And other companies have so many yeah buts about that. Yeah, but that's why we hired you to do this one role. Just do your job, right? And they could have all the best intentions, but I think the three of us know that we do things for reasons bigger than just our roles. And we can still do our roles really, really well. It's not an either or, it's a yes and. So that's why these conversations are always going to go. And that's the thing each one of us have. We're always going to go to things that we really care about, others, right? Maybe it even goes to why we do what we do, right? And we can still do our jobs well. What I want to make sure people hear is that you can do things at your job so well that other people follow you because they know you're a leader they can trust, and that it makes your job easier to do with other people that know why you do what you do. And then you can do things that are really difficult, but people will help you because they know why you care. I think if that's missed and we just get to just do your job, that's when people get burnt out.
Yep. I mean, on the compliance side, right? Just do what you need to check the box. Or on the security side, just make sure we don't, get hacked. Okay. Well, there's more to it than that, right? There's more to it than checking the box on the compliance sheet, right? And you're right, absolutely, Mark. We need to remember that for sure.
And I think the other piece that you both touched on is, one of the reasons I'm been where I've been for 25 years is the mission, the value of the company, right? That allows me to do my nonprofit work to help the next generation of Atlanteans and beyond be in a position of choice for their career. Go into the collegiate realm, go into the Boys and Girls Club, go into these different venues and help the next generation. So they're connecting to the value of GRC, the value of security, the value of leadership. These become the three cornerstones of this leadership blueprint we're talking about, because so much of it is about trust, but you've got to connect and listen. That's probably the other key piece that most people don't understand in this space is, are you listening to the different communities within your organization?
I like that. Mark, you stop talking. I was going to say, it's, as honestly, I didn't have this thought before jumping on this call, but this idea of digital trust in general, but I know it kind of focused on digital trust, is, this idea, at least has been in the security realm for a long time, right? It's a CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And that idea of data integrity, it's just honestly a little bit reframed into digital trust, system integrity, data integrity, the whole thing. And so we've been after that topic for a long time, or that ideal state for a long time. I'm interested, like, why has trust now risen to a state that goes even outside of the security realm? It's in GRC, it's in data, it's in everywhere. This idea of digital trust. Are we in it now because of this AI arms race? Are there other reasons we're now so focused on it, where it's been a concept for so long? I don't know that I have the answer. I'm just kind of thinking out loud.
And by the way, I am listening to it on LinkedIn Live on my phone, so it's delayed. So when I'm still nodding, it's because there's an actual delay. So I heard him talk about, I will overcome technology problems, man. We've all done things where we had to overcome stuff. But Brian's point to, leading up the next generation and what's going on and being able to do that. There's some questions about, like, from Eric Warner, that talked about what you wish you had done earlier in your CISO journey. I want to make sure, there's two ways to pronounce that same word, to make sure that
only one way, only one right way.
CISO. So some things in your, I'll tell you, it's funny. It's like Ford versus Chevy, or,
Right.
you're very adamant, you guys are very adamant about how that's pronounced. I was like, but so things that you learned early in your journey, just especially tying in what you talked about future leaders, how things have changed using AI, how even the way people learn is different. We've even had conversations about, do people even need to have advanced degrees to be able to do this, or can they just get certs? So just want to pick this up, knowing that, let's say, my favorite thing is, imagine you're half your age. What would you tell somebody half your age?
Embrace the opportunity and be apt to learn anything. The biggest thing, I was just listening to a podcast yesterday of all CISOs asking for the purple unicorn. They want this list that's a mile long of people experiences. Be willing to learn, be willing to jump in when people ask. Half the reason I'm in where I'm at is because some leader saw something in me at some point in time in my career and said, hey, I think you'd be good at this. And I look at them like, huh? No. And I did. I trusted them. And I think that's where I got in my career. And by the way, not a CISO, GRC architect. So I think there's so many specializations and journeys to take, explore. And the biggest thing is, even today, I probably spend on an average an hour to 3 hours a day just learning. And you have to constantly be willing to learn, because there's always something new out there. I mean, heck, when I started computers, I was on a Tier City Model 3 writing Pascal, Fortran, and BASIC. Okay, I was 8. But, I mean, that's the real story. Those things don't exist anymore. Actually, there's one in Roswell, the Computer Science Museum. I actually just saw it a couple months ago. But, my Apple Watch has more technology than the first computers I played with. So you always got to be apt to learn and embrace new opportunity.
I'll say, yeah, Brian, stay curious, right? Kind of that same concept. Be willing to serve. Don't think too much of yourself, but be confident in your capabilities. And then invest in relationships. Like, I wish I had done that earlier in my career. And I spend a lot of time doing that now, but it took me a while to realize that was something that was important. And I don't know why it did, but maybe, through the leaders I had as I've progressed on my journey. But I encourage all young professionals or professionals earlier in their career than me to invest in relationships, and that could be a variety of different things. That could be, you know, getting a mentor or mentoring even somebody that's younger than you, a student, and getting involved in associations, start networking, and being able to leverage those long-standing relationships in some future capacity. Maybe you need a job. Maybe you are allowed. You have an opportunity to introduce two people that may find some benefit from knowing each other. I just invest in relationships as much as you can.
To Brian's point about learning, I'd love to add on to that. Bring somebody along with you, right? So even when you're learning, I love learning in cohorts, or I like learning with other people. I like bringing somebody along because it creates some accountability where you're learning, but if you study together or you have a conversation or etc., it's really just more interesting because people learn differently. And to your point, Don and both of you guys, it's like being confident. And this is different than fake it till you make it. Being confident means you know how to communicate information, but you also know how to take some digs every once in a while when you're not doing things right. You're not just hearing everybody say you're doing it well, but that's called ruinous empathy. There's a book that talks about how radical candor, but also understanding that it's better to make your mistakes early, but even as you're going and making mistakes later on, make sure they're non-fatal errors, that you can learn from them and be able to lean in. I think that a lot of people are afraid to do that now, right? They don't want to be seen as a failure because they fail. But most of us, we learn from our mistakes and learn the way we work through things. And even the job you have now, if it's not your last role, think about how, if you're not extracting everything from it to learn, what is the opportunities that you have when you're even in a bigger role and you make a mistake and has a bigger impact. Make your learnings happen in real time. So it's, guys, even if you're in a certain role and we have like 10 minutes left, it's like, how about things that aren't your responsibility or they're not your problem, but they become your responsibility? How do you work with things where all of a sudden it's thrown into your lap because of what's going on and they just look to you because either you're vocal, confident, or you're just the person that it comes to? How do you address some of this stuff as you have to work through other people?
Well, I think and hopefully if things are coming to you, and this is not always the case, but hopefully things are coming to you because there's trust from the organization. Like you've put in some work and effort to build that trust over time. And so even if it is maybe outside your wheelhouse or it's something tangent to what you're doing, and they, leaders think, well, he's doing well here, or she's doing well here, like she can take it on and she'll be fine, or whatever that case may be. And that's happened several different times, sometimes somewhat recently, and further back in the career. I think having a posture of willingness to serve, a desire to do the best you can all the time and put in the effort, and to your point, Mark, being willing to fail, but not make the same failures over and over, learn from them and keep moving. And so when I've gotten things dumped on my lap like that, or just additional responsibilities, hey, you got to take this, they don't always work out. For the most part, the majority of times they do, because I don't like to fail. I don't like to, I shouldn't say that. I don't like to realize that I can't do something. I'm going to put in the work effort to do the best I can. And most of the time that's going to work out, not all the time. But over time, more and more of these opportunities come my way. I get more comfortable in being uncomfortable, where whatever was handed to me may not be something I think I'm good at. And kind of to your point, Brian, right, where leaders come to you like, oh, you can do this. You're like, I don't know about that, but I'll give it a shot. And that is also another way to continue to build trust with your colleagues and your leaders.
And I think the other thing with that is I love when leaders ask that to people. I do that to people. Seek feedback. And I solicited, unsolicited, constantly be getting feedback. It's not always going to be positive, but then the first thing to say is, thank you for the feedback. And then, understand it, tease it out, whatever it is, right? And I love it that I saw someone said their first computer was a Tandy 1000. That was my second. But you go back in your career, so many of those building blocks are built from good feedback. Because some things you're going to do well, but most of the seasoned leaders in security GRC, we learned in trial and error. There was no book. There was no COBIT 5. There was no COBIT. There was no NIST. Those things didn't exist back in the day. It was, oh, yeah, we got to do this. Okay, well, let me figure out how to network this and, how I'm going to connect, XYZ vendors together and get a result out of it. Those types of things you're going to learn. But I like what Don said is you learn from your mistake and you don't repeat it. That's always the thing I look for is, are you growing? Are you maturing? And providing that environment. And that's like in my volunteer work, one of the big things I focus on is the leaders I have in the chapter. How do I help them learn? How do I give them opportunities, do those things and thrive? How do we help other chapters thrive? Because that's what you really want out of your organization. So that's why I've always adapted what I call the win philosophy, where everybody wins. Because if you do that, then you become that trusted person in your organization, your trusted person in your area of influence, you're trusted, wherever you're at, because people know your mentality of everybody wins. And I think so much of the time now, people want to win and they think, well, if I win, someone else has to lose. No. There's always a play where everybody can win until someone decides to play the win-lose card. And that's where then you have to have the difficult and crucial conversation. Still one of my favorite books is Crucial Conversations. Is you've got to have those conversations and you've got to start preparing for them before they become an issue. And I'll end with this, is I talked to a mentee yesterday and I was so proud because she said, I saw there was a problem and I addressed it before it happened. And I'm like, man, you got to put that in your daily top 10 for the month, because identifying how to handle things before it's an issue so your leader doesn't have to address it is huge. But that's a learned behavior, right? But you get excited on those things. So I think that ties to what you were saying, both of you.
And it builds that trust with the leader too. And I know we're coming up on the end of it, but as we kind of went deep on trust in relationships, which is awesome because I love that topic. I think we all love it. But tying it back to digital trust, there's a lot of parallels, right? I mean, it's in relationships, if you have transparency, reliability, kind of integrity in those conversations and those interactions, that's kind of what we want on the digital side too, right? Between systems and data, wherever those happen to be, the systems we interact with, the data we put in, the data that comes out, the decisioning that we can make off of that. We want transparency. We want to know what's happening. We want to make sure our data is protected and the integrity stays there. And we want reliability. Like we know the expected outcomes and what we can come to expect from whatever systems we are working with and data we're working with within our enterprises. So I like the parallels that we got into.
Yeah, and that's the way we kind of roll. That's why we're doing another one of these on May 23rd. It'll be our next session. And as you can tell, there might be a title, but we actually go deeper and we just try to be real. And I think that's one of the things that I think each one of us, we try to keep it real, that it's not just about the occupation. We each love what we do. And so do so many other people. It's just that why not go and actually talk about what really matters And those are where conversations happen, which change lives, not just ours, but the people that actually look and see what we do and say, wow, you guys can do this and have a role, but also care about what's going on. So we'd love you to join us May 23rd. We're going to actually have a PDF that we're going to post on LinkedIn that has some of the information that we didn't go over, some of the other technical aspects, some other things, but we'd love you to join, and we're going to be posting the next one so you can sign up, tell other people that, hey, this was time well spent, and we'd love to see you at the next one. Gentlemen, thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks.
That was fun. I think the symbol for our session today was the apple, so I'm going to go with that.
Thank you.
As long as it's not Mark's apple, then we're okay.
That's right. Yeah.
Be well. Bye, guys.